Hello and welcome back to the Palm Performance Workshop. It's January 2025 and we've got a new project to kick off the new year. Let's give it a look. Let's do the dramatic reveal, shall we? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Hey! And some of you would have already seen the clue, but we have a 2024 CBR 1000 RR SP. And this is going to be built into a track/race bike. And for me, it makes a refreshing change. Because although I have built a few of these since they came out in 2020, the R1 is generally a more popular track bike. I think because it's been about longer, it's got quite a reputation as being quite easy to ride and relatively cheap to build. Whereas people seem to think these bikes are expensive to build. Now, they are, if you buy the RRR SP like this one, it is quite an expensive bike. But you don't have to buy this model. You can buy the RR-R, which is pretty much the same bike really. It's just got different brake calipers. It's got conventional normal forks rather than Öhlins electronic stuff and a sort of more standard rear shock. But there's nothing to stop you from buying that base model. You can buy the blipper kit for the base model as an optional accessory. If I remember right, they were around about the £500 mark. And, you know, we changed the suspension anyway, so there's no reason why you can't put a set of internals and a different rear shock into the RR-R model. But that's not what we're doing here. We are starting here with an RRR SP. And the other sort of common misconception with these, which was true when they first came out, was that you couldn't really do anything with them on track without changing to the HRC race kit electronics. And those kit electronics, retail price-wise, are somewhere in the region of about £6,000, which is just mental. Especially when you look at, I mean, the Yamaha stuff's like half the price. But we can now flash these ECUs and we can get around that. The biggest issue that is sort of known of with these for track use is that the ECU does tend to get upset if you change the gearing. Now with the Woolwich ECU flash, we can change the gearing in the flash. But that means once we've sort of set the gearing, that's kind of what you have to stick with, which isn't really that much of a problem. If you're using it for track riding, as a general rule, most of these thousands, you know, we know the gearing to use on these bikes because we've built a few of them for all your average track day riders. So you can put a general all-round good gearing on it, set that ECU, set that in the ECU along with the tyre sizes and stuff like that, and it's good to go and you needn't worry about it anymore. The HRC stuff's only really required if you're really seriously going racing with the thing and expecting to change gearing and such like all the time. So yeah, hopefully that sort of cleared up a couple of misconceptions. So realistically, you could buy an RRR model, we could flash the ECU, we could change the suspension and stuff, and you've got a really good track bike for no more than an R1 really is going to cost you. And the nice thing with these newer 2024 bikes is you get this new version of wing that they have over the original ones, which is pretty cool. And they also have something called split throttles. Now, it's something that was used in World Superbike years ago, and then they sort of banned it, but now it's come back in with certain production bikes. The new motor uses it, the 24 onwards Fireblade uses it, and people at BSB can use it with bikes that have two banks. So like a Ducati V4, they have two banks of cylinders, which means they have two sets of throttle bodies. You can control those throttle bodies independently. Same with the Aprilia RS V4, which I developed split throttle maps for in the Superstock class a couple of years ago. But anyway, with the split throttle, basically what that's all about is making it easier to open the throttle when you're at max lean angle, just sort of cracking it open as you come in the corner or as you're trying to exit the corner. And it kind of makes it easier for you to open the throttle and kind of technically gives you more grip as a function of that. So as you first pick up the throttle at full lean, it will open the throttles on 2 cylinders only, and then the further the bike gets upright and the more you open the throttle, the more it'll open the other 2 to bleed in, until of course you've got full power and full whack. So that's just a little bit about that. Obviously that's only on the 24 onwards bikes. Other than the wings and the split throttles, that's pretty much all that was changed. So plan with this bike, you'll get all the usual bits: rear sets, full exhaust system, got aqua system for it, got a big delivery of parts coming, bars, Öhlins fork kit, Öhlins rear shock. Actually, another good point. So the rear shock's a bit tucked away on these, but on the SP, it does have an Öhlins rear shock as standard. We will get that converted by Darren at MCT to TTX spec. So it'll take out the electronically controlled gubbins and revalve it and respring it. So that saves a couple of quid there. But the first big job really is to take off the majority of the road parts, and then we're going to go and take it over to Track Electronics and get it running on the dyno. Now, a lot of the time when I'm doing a bike build, I'll actually worry about running it in when it's a new one. I'll worry about running the bike in after it's all built. Now, the problem with this is they run so badly when you put a full system on them, that sort of going to sort of put a base map in it and then sort of run it in with that all not quite right is not ideal. So we're going to run it in as a standard road bike. We're just going to take all the bodywork off it and stuff first. Now, in the HRC manual for these bikes, Honda do actually specify a specific running in procedure, which you can find info on if you really want. So you can follow that, running it in as per their recommendations, and we'll do that on the oil that's in the bike at the moment. And then once that's all done, we'll also give it an oil and filter change, as well as building the rest of the bike. And then once the rest of the bike's built, we've got all the exhaust on it, we'll give it back to John at Track Electronics, and me and John will work together and sort out some decent mapping for this, and hopefully it'll all be good. But anyway, enough of me rambling on. Let's get the old camera set up, get the old hyperlapse going, and get some bodywork off this thing. Well, that wasn't too painful. It's been a while since I've taken road body work off one of these. So before we head to the dyno, just thought we'd cover a couple of little other things. When you remove all the bodywork and stuff, you kind of lose the bracket which holds the regulator rectifier. So obviously you've got to do something to hold that up out of the way. Now, as part of the HRC kit, they do a bracket, which bolts on up there, to do that job. And it's a little bit expensive. So if we just have a look on my phone at it on Tenkarte's website, look at that, 780 euros for a bracket for a regulator rectifier. Bonkers. However, there is an alternative. This one here from my friend Wayne at Champion Equipment. He's had them made. Now, as per the HRC one, it doesn't get supplied with, when you just buy a bracket, it doesn't get any rubbers or anything with it. So these rubbers and bushes are just out of my stock, but generally you can find some on the road gear that you can borrow out of it. And then that basically bolts on the bike there. And then obviously the regulator rectifier bolts up to it. So we'll get that fitted and show you that, and then move on to the next thing. That's that sorted. Lovely old job, keeps it out of the way. The wiring can run over the top of it. Nice. Right, next thing, this unit here. Now if you bought an RRR model, not an SP, you wouldn't have this unit and you wouldn't have the problem that we have with it. So this is the SCU, the suspension control unit, and on the SP models that controls the electronic adjusters on the forks and on the rear shock. Where are we? You can kind of just about see them in there. But what we've done, we've unplugged them up there and here. We will obviously tuck all that wiring out of the way when we get a bit further into the bike build. Because we're putting aftermarket suspension in, so the aftermarket suspension isn't electronically adjustable. Now the problem is, the moment you disconnect these, it then throws a fault on the ECU, and that's one of the items that we can't turn off on the Woolwich flash. So there's a few things that we can unplug, like emission systems and lambda sensors and stuff like that, which with the Woolwich flash we can turn off the fault codes for them and disable them, but we can't do that with the suspension. So we have to do something with this, and basically we've got a unit from Howwver called a CESE03. Yeah, and all that is this little unit, which is like a bypass plug. So theoretically, all we've got to do is plug that in there. Obviously we'll tie it up to the wiring loom, and that should mean that we don't get any suspension faults if we turn the bike on. Which now all looks good. Let's see if it still lets you change the modes. Yeah, so you can still change the mode, so it still thinks it's working, but obviously it's not, which is ideal. So this bit down here, this is the different suspension modes, and you can set your own custom setting and stuff like that. But obviously because we're putting race stuff in, we won't use that at all. It's just got a little bypass plug in so that it doesn't have to think about it. So job done, that was easy enough. I think that was about 90 quid. So not the end of the world. I know all these little bits add up, but it'll save us a bit of weight off the bike as well, carrying around the original unit. What I have seen people do before is they'll actually strip the gubbins out of these and then tuck them up in the wiring loom somewhere rather than buying a bypass unit. The bypass units haven't always been available, but being as they are, we bought one. So the other thing we can't turn off the fault for is the electronic steering damper, and we are going to replace this with a Öhlins manual adjustable one. Now, Howwver themselves actually do a lot of steering damper eliminator plugins, but for whatever reason they don't do one for this model. I have tried one that I had knocking around, but it wouldn't play ball. But all it means is that we get this little HESD, which is Honda electronic steering damper warning symbol up there, but as far as I'm aware, it shouldn't, he says, shouldn't hopefully affect anything. It will still let us go through all the power modes and stuff like that. So I think we should be all good. We'll just have to try and ignore the little red sign in the corner. Well, that's all good to go to the dyno now. I suppose really we better check it runs. These things are keyless. I say keyless, they still have a fob, but you know, you don't have to put it in an ignition. But what always makes me laugh about that is you still need the key for the fuel tank and for the seat. But hey, button on the side. Horrendous noise from the exhaust servo. Let's see if it'll fire up. Fuel pump prime. Well, that sounds suitably quiet and awful. Next job, take it to the dyno.